The WWE universe is seething right now, and they have every right to be. What I'm about to tell you is going to make your blood boil and question everything you thought you knew about your favorite wrestling superstars. Jimmy and Jey Uso, the so-called heroes of their own birthday party fire incident, are being praised as leaders and role models, but the real story that WWE and the mainstream wrestling media don't want you to know is absolutely disgusting. While everyone's busy celebrating #USOstrong and calling them heroes, I've got the inside scoop that's going to shatter your perception of what really went down that night in Orlando. And trust me, when you hear what I'm about to reveal, you're going to be furious at how the wrestling world is being manipulated and lied to. Here's what they want you to believe happened. Jimmy and Jey Uso threw a lavish birthday party in Orlando. A kitchen fire broke out, and the heroic Uso brothers calmly led everyone to safety like some kind of wrestling superheroes. The media is painting this picture of two responsible, mature superstars who handled a crisis with grace and leadership. Social media is exploding with praise, fans are calling them heroes, and WWE is probably already planning to use this incident as a storyline to make them look even better. But here's what's really grinding my gears, and what should be making you absolutely livid: this whole heroic leader narrative is complete and total garbage. The truth about what happened that night is so much more reckless, irresponsible, and downright dangerous than anyone wants to admit. First off, let's talk about this lavish venue they chose. My sources tell me this wasn't some high-end, properly equipped party facility. This was a converted warehouse space that had been hastily set up for private events, with questionable safety protocols and fire suppression systems that were clearly inadequate for the size of the event they were hosting. And don't even get me started on the guest list. They packed this place with over 200 people, WWE superstars, their families, friends, hangers-on, and who knows who else, in a space that was probably only rated for half that capacity. This wasn't some intimate birthday celebration, this was a massive party that prioritized spectacle over safety, and the Uso brothers were the ones who signed off on every single dangerous decision. But here's where it gets really infuriating: they hired a catering company that had zero experience handling events of this magnitude in venues like this. The kitchen setup was a disaster waiting to happen, with portable cooking equipment jammed into a space that wasn't designed for commercial food preparation. Any competent event planner would have taken one look at that setup and said, absolutely not, but the Uso brothers were too busy trying to throw the party of the century to care about basic safety. My insider sources are telling me that multiple people raised concerns about the fire safety protocols before the party even started. Venue staff, catering personnel, and even some of the WWE superstars who arrived early were asking questions about emergency exits, fire suppression systems, and evacuation procedures. And you know what Jimmy and Jey's response was? They basically brushed off these concerns because they didn't want to kill the vibe of their big celebration. So when that minor kitchen mishap turned into a legitimate fire that filled the venue with smoke and sent over 200 people scrambling for exits in a panic, the Uso brothers and their PR team immediately went into damage control mode. They couldn't let the truth come out, that their reckless planning and disregard for basic safety protocols had put hundreds of people, including their own family members and closest friends, in serious danger. That's why the story you're hearing everywhere is about their heroic leadership and calm under pressure response. They need you to believe that narrative because the alternative, that they were criminally negligent in their party planning and nearly got people killed because of their ego and stupidity, would absolutely destroy their careers and probably land them in legal trouble. And here's what's making me absolutely furious about this whole situation: the wrestling media is eating up this hero narrative without asking a single critical question. Where's the investigation into how this fire started? Where's the scrutiny of the venue's safety protocols? Where are the interviews with the people who were actually there and witnessed the chaos and panic firsthand? Instead, we're getting these sanitized, feel-good stories about how Jimmy and Jey sprang into action and rallied their guests like they're some kind of natural disaster response team. Give me a break. These are the same guys who thought it was a good idea to pack 200+ people into an inadequately equipped venue with questionable fire safety measures. But here's the part that's going to make you absolutely sick. WWE's corporate machine is already spinning this incident into a positive storyline opportunity. They're probably in meetings right now figuring out how to work this heroic narrative into their programming, maybe even giving the Uso brothers a face turn based on their leadership during crisis. And don't think for a second that this is just some innocent PR spin. This is calculated manipulation designed to cover up what was essentially a massive safety failure that could have resulted in serious injuries or even deaths. The fact that nobody got hurt wasn't because of Jimmy and Jey's leadership, it was pure luck and the quick response of professional firefighters who actually knew what they were doing. My sources are telling me that several guests required medical attention for smoke inhalation, but that information is being suppressed to maintain that nobody got hurt narrative. There were people who had panic attacks, elderly guests who struggled to evacuate quickly, and children who were traumatized by the experience, but none of that fits the heroic story that's being pushed. And let's talk about the real victims here, the venue staff and catering workers who are now being blamed for this mishap, while the Uso brothers get praised as heroes. These working-class people are having their reputations destroyed and their livelihoods threatened because they're being scapegoated for a situation that was created by the reckless decisions of millionaire wrestlers who wanted to throw an over-the-top party. The catering company that's being blamed for the kitchen mishap was working with equipment and in conditions that they specifically raised concerns about beforehand. But when you're dealing with WWE superstars who are used to getting their way and don't want to hear about potential problems, what choice do you have? These workers were put in an impossible situation and are now being thrown under the bus to protect the precious reputations of the Uso brothers. And here's what's really going to make your blood boil: while Jimmy and Jey are being celebrated on social media and getting sympathy from the wrestling world, the people who actually suffered because of this incident are being silenced and ignored. The venue staff who lost their jobs, the catering workers who are facing lawsuits, the guests who were traumatized, where are their voices in this story? This brings me to the legal aspects of this situation that nobody wants to talk about. When you host an event and your negligent planning results in a fire that requires emergency response and puts people in danger, that's not a mishap, that's potentially criminal negligence. If this had happened to regular people instead of beloved WWE superstars, there would already be investigations, lawsuits, and criminal charges being filed. But because it's Jimmy and Jey Uso, suddenly everyone's focused on their heroic response instead of their criminally irresponsible planning. The double standard is absolutely disgusting and shows exactly how corrupt and biased the wrestling industry really is. My legal sources are telling me that there are already discussions about potential civil lawsuits from guests who were put in danger, venue staff who lost their jobs, and the catering company that's being unfairly blamed. But guess what? Those stories aren't making it into the wrestling news cycle because they don't fit the narrative that WWE and the Uso brothers want to push. And here's the kicker: insurance companies are already investigating this incident because of the massive property damage and potential liability issues. But while that investigation is happening behind closed doors, the public is being fed this fairy tale about heroic leadership and family values. This whole situation perfectly illustrates the sickening hypocrisy of the wrestling world. When wrestlers we like do something wrong, suddenly it's a learning experience or a character-building moment. But when wrestlers we don't like make mistakes, they get crucified and have their careers destroyed. Imagine if this exact same scenario had happened with wrestlers that the internet loves to hate, say, if Roman Reigns or Cody Rhodes had thrown a reckless party that resulted in a fire and endangered hundreds of people. The wrestling community would be calling for their heads, demanding suspensions, and using it as proof that they're out-of-touch prima donnas who don't care about anyone but themselves. But because it's the beloved Uso brothers, suddenly everyone's making excuses and praising their leadership in a crisis that they created through their own negligence. It's absolutely sickening and shows exactly how manipulated and biased the wrestling fanbase really is. The worst part? This incident is going to be completely forgotten in a few weeks, and Jimmy and Jey will probably come out of this looking better than ever. They'll get sympathy for their ruined birthday party, praise for their heroic response, and probably a storyline boost that makes them even more popular with fans. Meanwhile, the people who actually suffered because of their reckless decisions will be left to deal with the consequences while getting zero support from the wrestling community. The venue staff who lost their jobs, the catering workers facing lawsuits, the guests who were traumatized, they'll all be forgotten while the Uso brothers get celebrated as heroes. This is exactly the kind of story that proves why channels like WrestlingNewsCC exist, to tell you the truth that the mainstream wrestling media won't touch. While everyone else is pushing the sanitized, WWE-approved version of events, I'm here to give you the real story that will make you question everything you thought you knew about your favorite superstars. The wrestling world needs to wake up and start holding these celebrities accountable for their actions instead of making excuses every time they screw up. Jimmy and Jey Uso are not heroes, they're reckless millionaires who put hundreds of people in danger because they wanted to throw a spectacular party and couldn't be bothered to prioritize basic safety. If you thought tonight's story was wild, trust me, what happens next will blow your mind. So don't stop now. Click on the video right here on your screen to continue the chaos, the drama, and the inside scoop only we deliver. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and join the Wrestling News CC family, where the real stories of WWE come to life. See you in the next one.